Today is Sunday. How's everyone doing? And today we're gonna answer some questions. I know some of you have questions, and if you do have a question, leave it in the comment, and I will get to that. Whether it's in the live stream right now, or if you are watching it in the replay itself. In any case, do say hi here, and I'll be more than glad to kind of like give you a shout out if you do. So let's get to it. Today's show, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna answer some of the questions. Now, these questions are questions that I have gotten from Quora, and essentially, this is some of the questions that I would like to answer when it comes down to making mistakes in business. As you know, when you are running your business itself, inevitably there are going to be some mistakes that you're going to make. If anyone tells me that in their business they have never made mistakes before, there's only two possibility. One is that they are outright lying. The other is that they have not done anything that it's out of the ordinary. So, there are no such thing as not making any mistakes. In fact, I would be first to tell you that I kind of make mistakes every day in my business itself. Not that I'm stupid, but because you want to be able to push the envelope, you want to be able to try new things, you want to be able to see how far you can go with a certain thing, and that's why inevitably you will make some mistakes. Now, the thing with making mistakes is that it is fine to make mistakes, but it is not fine to make the mistake again. And so this whole series, from Monday up to today itself, really we are talking about making mistakes. So Monday we essentially talk about the thinking behind making mistakes. And I think, if anything and with everything, you got to start off with the thinking behind it, because once you have that thinking correct, downstream, what's going to happen is that it's going to give you a better chance at getting things right. But if at the outset you kind of screw up the thinking process itself, which in most instances that's what's happened to most people, downstream you're going to have a lot of problem, right? So on Monday we talk about the thinking, on Tuesday we talk about the approach, the 3D approach, if you can recall, right? And on Wednesday I talk about the various books that I've read that help me in terms of recognizing the mistakes and also helping me in rectifying the mistakes. um, on Thursday itself, we talked about the flywheel behind the mistakes. And so, what are some mistakes that people make when it comes down to the flywheel? I mean, that is crucial because the flywheel is something that is going to get you from a minimum viable business or minimum viable product to a something that is scalable, something that is going to be able to help you to reach that 1 million revenue. And so, if you get the flywheel wrong, it's gonna downstream is gonna create a lot of issues for you. And then on Friday we talk about the process of how to rectify mistakes, and yesterday we talk about the tools that you can use in addressing the mistakes that you've made. All right, and so if anything, I am quite a professional mistake maker. So there you go. Now, in that case, today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the questions, right? So I've got a few questions here. It's actually I am, going to answer um, three of these questions, which I think are really, really crucial. And these are the three top questions that people ask. So number one question that people ask is, what are the top three mistakes in online business? And my point of view is that when it comes down to online business, I think the number one mistake that most people make is this. The first mistake that most people make is that they think that just because I build it, people will come. And they think that, by throwing a bunch of ads behind that, it's going to get people to want to come to your website, for example. And I think that is a very, very, um, I would say, irresponsible way of doing an online business, because unless you are looking at purely just that business as a form of outlet, it's not, it's a outlet for expression, and you have no intent to like monetize it, or you're just doing it as a hobby, then sure, fine, you do whatever you want with it, right? However, if you have the intent of turning it into a business, then the number one mistake that people make is that they feel that I will just build whatever I want, and people will find me. So that, I think, it's the first mistake itself, right? Just looking at it selfishly, and just wanting to do something that you feel that it's something about me, and people will like me or they don't. um and so with that itself, I think a lot of people think like, well, that's how Seth Godin does it, that's how Anthony Robbins does it. Well, the fact of the matter is, you are not Seth Godin, you are not Anthony Robbins. So you know um get over get over that, right? And so the number one mistake really is that it's not a situation of just because you build it, people will come. Number two mistake I think most people make, and I've seen most people make, it's the mistake of not doing sufficient market research. Now, not doing sufficient market research, I think it's not acceptable, because these days, with the tools and resources at your disposal, and most of them are free, there's really no reason for you not to do the kind of research to give you a better insight in terms of what your customers or what your prospects are looking at, right? So it's silly, not to want to do the research itself. I mean, not knowing how to do the research is another thing, but not wanting to do the research, that's crazy. And I think the third, number one mistake that most people make when it comes down to online business is, just because they are users of the social media platforms and websites and all that, they kind of think that um, they they know everything. Now, the truth of the matter is that, yes, it's possible for you to know a lot, and once you know what you need to find out, essentially, you can go out to Google and you can look out for whatever you want to look for, right? And anything, just about anything that you can think of, Google would have an answer for that. So it's inconceivable that um, you will not be able to find the information, or you are not able to dig out what you need to know. So the the thing behind this is really as follows. So the number three mistake that I think many people make is that they think that they know everything. And on the same note, the greatest danger is that they do not know what they do not know. Now, l- last week, when I was conducting a course teaching people how to use mobile video to tell stories, um, one of the revelation for many of the participants was really the fact that when I show them certain ways of doing research on their audience, and the tools that I shared with them, it kind of blows them away, and it blows their mind that such information is actually publicly available, and it is available at our disposal. And so you know, they if they have never been to my course itself, then they really wouldn't know what they do not know, because they wouldn't know that a tool like this exists. And if they didn't know that the tool like this exists, then they wouldn't know that they do not know how to use that tool. And so, with that itself, it really kind of brings in a deeper level. So, not knowing not knowing what you do not know, I think it's probably one of the scariest thing. One way you can address that, definitely, it's to get someone to teach you, or to get someone to become your mentor, because it is really through the process itself that you are able to see your blind spot, and you probably will be able to understand what is it that you do not know. So that it's question number one. Now let's look at question number two. What's a resource that would have saved you from the biggest mistake in your business? What is that one resource that would have saved you from your biggest mistake in business? Well, I think that the question is interesting. However, I think to think of there is a resource that could have saved you from the biggest mistake, um, I think that it's a little bit of a huge generalization. Now, first and foremost, let's unpack this question itself. What is the biggest mistake in business? I would say, I mean, if you ask me, I would say the biggest mistake in business is to assume that there is a demand. Because if if you think that there is a demand, and what happens is that you fall victim to this idea called, confirmation bias. Now, what confirmation bias essentially means is that when you believe, or you feel very passionate about a particular idea, you tend to look for information to back up your belief. Now, you may do it consciously or subconsciously, but the fact of the matter is that we are all, you know, we can all be fall victim to confirmation bias. And so I think the biggest mistake is to think that, there is demand, and kind of like dig up information to support your claim. And so the biggest mistake with that is to think of that. Now, the way or the resource to kind of save you from making that mistake, it's the following. Yes, it's good that you are passionate about what you're doing, and it is good that you think that there is going to be a demand. I mean, you firmly believe in it, because later on, when you have to sell your idea, whether to a customer or to an investor, you have to believe in it. So without that firm belief, it's just not going to work, right? Now, of course, we're not talking about, at people like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs. We're talking about, ordinary people like you and I. And so what we really need to make sure that we do not make this mistake is, once we have fallen in love with the idea that we have, the next thing is really to go down on the ground and to validate that idea. And when I say validate that idea, it's not about picking up information to back your theory, right? It's about really n- being that investor yourself, putting on the cap of an investor and looking objectively at the idea itself. So, really asking yourself, like, is it true that this idea of yours really has legs, right? I mean, are you able to pull data from various places to help you determine that there is actually demand? And so I think the biggest mistake here is to not, um, you know, look for information to prove yourself wrong. You should look for information to prove yourself wrong instead of looking for information to prove yourself right. Because if you choose to, you would definitely find the information to prove yourself right, and you would probably be blinded by that itself. And so the resource that is able to help you from making that mistake, it's really to do objective research. And objective research could be many ways, but the tool that I would default to would definitely be Google Keyword Planner. You see, because we can think and we can do all the Google searches, and whatever you type in, inevitably it's going something is going to come out, right? There are definitely going to be search result for whatever you type in. But that exactly is not enough, because what you want to know is what is the demand, right? What is the demand? And of course, we can go into details like, even if there is a demand, is it a commercial with commercial intent or without commercial intent? I mean, there are lots of people who are searching for, how to cure plantar fasciitis, but that doesn't mean that people are ready to pay to address that problem. I mean, I'm ready to pay for that to address the problem. But the point is that you want to know whether is there demand, is there actually such a such an issue, and secondly, if people are willing to pay for it. So I would say that would be the um, resource that you definitely would need in order to avoid making the biggest mistake in business itself. So of course, if you ask different people, I would imagine that people will have different answer for that question itself, because what it means by different by biggest mistake would be different for different people. All right, and the third question, which is fairly much related to this, is how do you avoid mistakes in business research? Now, coming from a background of research, both at the academia level as well as a government policy, policy researcher level, I would say that the flawed or the mistakes in business research, essentially, it's a few fold. Number one, it's knowing what you to look for, right? Because arguably you can find just about anything you want on the internet. However, knowing what exactly are the data or the information that you would need, it's another thing altogether. So the first step really in the whole process of doing research itself is to form a hypothesis. Now, the hypothesis would be something as simple as, let me hypothesize and say that I believe that there are people who are concerned about area X, right? So that is the hypothesis. Well, then of course we can talk about, what are the assumptions behind that hypothesis itself, but that's another thing altogether. So once you have the hypothesis, the next thing is to then to identify what are the information that I would need to be able to prove that hypothesis, right? What are the information that I could gather that would tell me that that hypothesis is right or wrong? And so once you know the hypothesis, once you know what are the information to collect, then the next part really is to start collecting the information. Now, when you start collecting the information, the the real test is, are you getting the information from reputable sources that are validated, or are you getting information from places that could be biased, or places where they may have an agenda behind that, right? So we need to know if those information that you're gathering, is it subjective or is it objective. And then assuming you have been able to identify sources of information that are objective, the next phase is really, to be able to analyze that information and to be able to distill the insights from those information and data that you get from. Because technically speaking, anyone who know of those resources and where to get them would be able to get their hands on that piece of information. Now, but what sets you and me apart is the ability to read that information and to be able to distill insights from that information itself. Now, that insights is then going to tell you whether are you on the right track or not in terms of your hypothesis to begin with, right? And then from there, it's for you to then formulate a series of actions to take to validate or to nullify your hypothesis. And so that essentially is the key process itself. And the other thing I would say is that many a times when I look at how some people do research, they tend to rely on people's opinion. And with all things considered, I would say that let's make this simple assumption that people will people have their agenda, and so getting the opinion of one person, it is probably going to give you some insights. But if you're going to purely rely on people's opinion, then that in itself is bad research. All right, so there you have it. Those are the answers to the questions about making mistakes in business. If you got an additional question, make sure you leave it in the comment or you send me a text. I'll be more than happy to address those questions itself. If not, tomorrow, starting tomorrow, we're going to be going on a new series of content here. And tomorrow, we're going to be talking about what is the first step that you want to do when you're looking to at starting this 1% 1 million on digital business. So if you want to know what is the first step that you need to do, we go through the whole process again. We go through the thinking behind it, the approach or the framework. We talk about the books that you could read. We talk about the flywheel that you can build, the process that you need, the tools that you need, as well as we'll answer your question. So if you want to know what is the first step to take when starting this 1% 1 million old digital business, then make sure you stay tuned for tomorrow's episode. So to do that, make sure you subscribe to this channel. And if this episode has been useful to you, let me know. Give me a thumbs up. If it has not been useful to you, then all the more you want to let me know and let me know what other information you would need. And with that, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye bye.